All right, so that is one of the top stories that we're focusing on here on the News Centre. I'd like to introduce my guest joining me here in studio, Jonathan Bosai. He is an education expert. Thank you very much for your time, Jonathan. It's great to see you.
Thank you, Betty.
All right, so this schools unrest, it's not the first time that we're seeing this happen. Last year, at a time like this, the same time, we saw the same thing happen. But also, on the other hand, there are a number of reasons that are being given. You have teachers saying that indeed it is because of this new policies with delocalization of school heads and teachers. But also, on the other hand, you're hearing things to do with entertainment. The students wanting to watch Russia, the students, being afraid of, mock examinations. From where you sit, considering everything that has happened even before, what do you think really is the main reason for this?
The main reason, Betty, for this unrest is that the adults in Kenya are not listening to children. And this goes back to 1974. In 1974, between March and September, more than 100 schools went down in flames. And the then president banned any form of strike in the country. But out of that, the current VC for Chuka University, Professor Kabiru Kinyanjui, did a study. And the study is interesting because it is actually titled The Art of Blaming the Victim. That in Kenya, we get to a space where things happen, but the victims are the ones blamed, in this case, the children. What is happening? World Cup is a very momentous occasion in the history of sporting. It comes after every 4 years. What schools need to do is to have dialogue with the children and let them know which matches they can watch, which ones they cannot watch, and explain to them why. But just telling them that this is not going to happen, especially when there's a change of leadership, and the previous leadership may have looked at the same issue differently. Children are bound to respond, and we are seeing it, because of the inability of the administration to listen to them. They are responding negatively. All
right. So So apart from the World Cup, of course, you have the mock examinations coming in, which historically many schools, you have this unrest also, taking place in many other schools. So apart from the entertainment aspect of it, are there other underlying issues in these schools that are, and we're seeing now the results of this?
Yeah, there are many issues, and for me, it will be, pedestrian for the Ministry of Education to peg everything on the examination. Examinations have been there. People have sat them. But there are triggers to these strikes that run beyond the examination. One of them is the content of the curriculum, which emphasizes knowledge and then examination. So because of that focus, many parents are pushing their children, and the idea is, it is second term, you need to go work. In third term, I want you to come back with an A. So with that limitation, the child feels under pressure. When something else happens, it actually becomes a catalyst for them to respond negatively. So it is a values issue, it's a discipline issue. But remember, Betty, if you look at your age and calculate the amount of time you spend out of school, it is very little. So it has nothing to do with largely parenting. It is the socialization process which happens in and out of school. We have teachers who are also under pressure. If you look at it, teachers are being promoted because of the mean scores they get. Teachers are being promoted because their class performed better. So teachers are now engaging mechanically with the learners for purposes of obtaining a particular grade, not guiding the teachers, not guiding the learners for them to obtain holistic growth. If you look at it, the teachers of language, Kiswahili and English, are the most strained in schools because you are likely going to have the first lesson and you are likely going to have the last lesson every day. Now, with the numbers, Betty, if you have 60 to 70 learners in a class and you have up to 5 to 6 lessons in a day, it means you are likely going to deal with 300 to 420 learners in one day.
In one day.
If you are a teacher of language, it means you have books to mark. Now, if you have extra responsibility, you are on duty, you are a games master, you are a guiding and counseling teacher, when will you get time to counsel and guide a learner you seeing leave the rail? So when a learner starts going off the tracks, it means the teacher needs time with them.
All right.
But the time is not there.
Okay.
And it is a function of training. Betty, I can tell you that many of the things you do are a function of what your mother did. If it is how you do your recipe in the kitchen, it is what you saw. So many teachers have a fallback position on how they were taught themselves. So the fallback position they have is if there is an errant learner, it's corporal punishment. So if it is corporal punishment, and the ministry has banned corporal punishment, what alternative has been made available for the teacher?
Okay.
All alternative punishment models and modes are very lengthy. It means the teacher has to take time out of the classroom, out of the staff room, to sit down with the learner and talk about the issue.
All right.
Now, it is very difficult for this talk to happen when the teacher has very tight targets to meet.
Right.
You have a curriculum to accomplish, you have a mean score to look up to, you have numerous lessons to attend to. So it is difficult for us to get to the bottom of this. The Ministry of Education needs literally to step back and ask itself, what is it we have not been doing right?
Right, all right.
Because going on like this, we are not going to get to the bottom of it.
Right, and it keeps recurring almost every year. I want to bring in another guest who's joining me by way of phone, Indimuli Kahi. He is the chair of the Kenya Secondary School Heads Association. Thank you very much for joining us here on News Centre. I'd ask you the same question that I asked Jonathan when we started. And of course, there are many narratives that are being fronted as to why we're having a lot of unrest in different schools across the country. We have students who have been arrested. It's quite a chaotic, period, and many schools are in crisis. What is your take on what we're seeing in our schools here in the country?
Thank you, Betty, for this chance, and thank you, the guest who is with you in the studio. I think what is going on now is regrettable, and it is something that as stakeholders in this country, we must seriously stop and think on how to stop this madness that has been going on year in, year out. It is not only now. Last year, at the same time, we had the same problem. Schools were up in flames. And at the end of it all, the principals and the teachers are blamed. One, for not being able to listen to students. Two, for bringing up policies that students don't like. But I would like to say this, that as principals and teachers, we listen a lot to the students. There are quite a number of policies that have been put in place that have given a lot of leeway to students to be able to do what they feel and what they would want done. And it becomes very difficult for the administrators to stop. For example, we have had a lot of the children's rights coming in. But what we are saying, the rights have come, but there is no mention of the students' responsibilities in these rights. For example, it is their right to be taught well, but it's their responsibility to be available in class to be taught. So the responsibilities that are bestowed upon the students are not there. We've not been able to come up with operational guidelines on some of these policies that have come into the management of the schools. We have talked a lot about guidance and counseling, and you and I know that guidance and counseling is a process. It is not just a one-off process where you'll call a student one day and talk to this student and expect a behavior change. It must be a process. And the same guidance and counseling teachers that have been assigned these responsibilities, they have also a teaching load of about 27 lessons a week. Apart from that, this teacher may be having other responsibilities. Maybe the teacher is also a member of a given house in a boarding school where they too have to do certain duties. When we had this problem last year, and we sat down as various stakeholders, two things came up. One from the ministry, where the then CS did say that the ministry is going to employ chaplains for schools. Up to now, the process is still going on, and chaplains are yet to be sent to schools. I'm aware there are some schools that have church-based schools that already have chaplains seconded to the schools by the sponsoring church, but a majority of the schools that are not having such a provision are yet to get the chaplains. So the support on that side is not there.
All right.
Two, the guidance and counseling was another key factor. Teacher Service Commission then also announced that it was going to employ full-time guidance and counseling teachers. This, again, has not happened. So you find there is a lot of demand in management of the students today, given the nature of our society. The students learn. There are a lot of values they pick. Some are taught and some are acquired. People tend, and students tend to go by what they have seen in the larger society. And that is what they are reflecting in their grievances today.
I also just want to hear your thoughts on that narrative. You know, the government is saying that this chaotic unrest is because of the delocalization of teachers. What is your take on this?
Delocalization of teachers as a policy started this year in early this year, 2018. It could just be one of them. But what we would also say, what about last year when the schools burnt in the same way before delocalization? What about the year before? So if we look at this year, delocalization could just be one of the triggers, because maybe the new principal came in and he or she is looking at things in a different manner, would wish certain things done in a different way, and maybe the students are used in another way. That could be a trigger. But it cannot be solely blamed on that one aspect. There are others that we need to look at. I've talked about the policies. I've talked about second term is also a very busy term. This is the time where we have a lot of activities at their peak. This is the time that brings together students in those activities. Music festival, for example, brings together thousands of students in a given venue. And if there is any idea being hatched in school A, it is easily shared in school B and C during those gatherings, you see. So it is a time that we need to also rethink about the timing of these activities. How do we place some of them to come in first term and those in second term that do not bring too many students together? Maybe this is an area that we need to look at. So it cannot be pointed on one factor. There are several factors that we need to look at.
All right. Inimuli, I'll ask you to just stay with us as I get some comments from Wesaya. So then what is the solution? Because, I mean, we have this issue recurring every time. I mean, what is that thing that would really, as much as we've mentioned, you know, maybe the change of principals who come with different rules and, you know, a different way of how they do their thing. But then it's so serious, you know, students are burning schools. So what really is the solution moving forward, considering that this has happened, you know, in previous years?
The solution is to make resources available to schools. What my teacher in the Muli will tell you is that some of the schools up to now have not received their capitation grants for this term. So some of these triggers, as he is referring to them, are a function of the students seeing that the administration is not responding to a particular need. We have schools that have gone down in flames because of diet. The children expected to have their rice and beans, and then they were given something else. So they resisted, and the administration says this is what is available today. And it is because the ministry has not shared the resources that the school need. And it is not just about money, it is also the human resource. Many of these schools that have been affected by these strikes, Mr. Ndimuli will tell you that they are extra county schools or the newly promoted national schools. What this means is that the school has 2-3 new streams that were not there. Yes. The infrastructure establishment has remained the same. In some schools now, Betty, you will be surprised that we have 4-decker beds. Children are literally sleeping on the roof. The teachers have remained the same. The numbers have not changed. So the number of children has doubled, but the teachers to supervise them, the numbers have remained the same. So it is strenuous on the teacher, especially the boarding teachers are going through a lot of trouble because you have to supervise the cleaning of the dormitories. Right. You have to ensure that the children are actually taking care of themselves. But you still, as Mr. Ndimuli mentioned, you have a teaching load that you need to deliver. So it is very difficult. And if you use the example that I had used before of being a teacher of language, it means you have a triple load to carry. So what the Ministry of Education needs to do is to reflect on all the pronouncements and the decrees they have issued since independence and just implement them. Right. Because, as Mr. Ndimuli mentioned, last year, the Cabinet Secretary for Education, Dr. Matiang'i, mentioned that they are going to employ full-time counselors in schools. That has not happened. They mentioned that they are going to improve on the establishment of teachers in the schools. That has not happened. They mentioned that they are going to improve infrastructure in schools. That has not happened. So the solution lies in us going back to implement that which we have promised to these children. All right. The children who are engaging in this strike today, these huge numbers we are talking about, are children who've come from the Free Primary Education Declaration in 2003. Yes. This is 2018. We have not planned for these children in 15 years. We cannot blame them 100%. They have they have a role to play, and as it is, we've talked so much about rights, and it is, typical Kenya parlance, haki yetu, haki yetu. But nobody is talking about the commensurate responsibility. What obligation do you have after this right is made? Right. This is the thing that we need to instill in the learners by way of value teaching. That for every right you have a responsibility coming in with it. Right. So that they get to know it from the word go. Right. But we also need to meet our part of the bargain as adults, that we have taken them to school, we need to make provision for them, and this provision must not just be a provision, it must be quality provision. Right, I like that. I just want Ndimuli, just talk to us about something that Jonathan has correctly mentioned, because last year we saw the same issues and a lot of promises were made, by the then CS Fred Matiang'i. But like Jonathan has mentioned, almost everything, that was promised at that time has not really been implemented. And maybe that's the reason why we're having this recurrence. Talk to us about that dire need, for the Ministry of Education to actually implement some of these promises, that they made, in previous years.
Thank you. I can't agree with Jonathan more. He's quite on the spot. What we are saying here is meeting the demands of the child today is very challenging. As I said, Term 2 has its own very many activities that we go through. Financing of these activities is very key. According to the ministry government financial processes, they go with financial years ending in June. School programs go with the calendar dates. So you find that in second term, when schools really need these funds, in Term 2, we get very little capitation somewhere in May. For example, this year, we received about 13% of the expected 30%. So it means that 17% is still being held by government, which we did talk about it during our conference, and at the moment, the government financial year is closed. Their systems are closed, so money cannot be dispersed to schools. And this is the time when the schools need that money seriously. And when they fail to meet certain obligation, definitely the students will come up. We cannot fail to address the issue of availability of staff. Definitely, as a country, we are having fewer teachers compared to the number of students. And as we support the increase in numbers to meet the 100% transition for our nation, it means that this must go in tandem with the increase of the number of staff to manage the increased number of students. When the staff remains still low, then you will find that the challenge of management of the child today becomes a big challenge, and we can see things happening which normally people will expect the teachers, the principals to have noticed the telltale signs, but these signs were not noticed on time. When we are talking about the infrastructure, of course, with the increased number of students, it must go also in tandem with the expanded infrastructure, which at the moment, in the majority of the school, it is still a challenge. That is why we made a proposal to the Ministry of Education that in the funding of schools, let there be a component of infrastructure development, so that this capitation, when it comes, there is some component of infrastructure development within a given institution. The Board of Management will sit down and look at their needs. As it is now, the schools make proposals, and the ministry will disperse the funds to schools. And it will not reach all schools. Certain schools will get in an area, others may not. So you find that the growth in infrastructure development of these institutions is not moving together with the increase of number of students. I've talked about the teachers too.
Yes.
We look at also the policies and the recommendations of past reports that need to be implemented. We have been challenged and accused as principals of schools that we've not implemented those recommendations. Some of the recommendations that were done, I would say we have done our best to implement them. For example, today students are given an opportunity to discuss and come up and elect their leaders. This was recommended in the Wangai report, and we have been living with it. But you'll discover that last year, when the schools were burning, the challenge was now the same leadership who have been elected that were now again inciting their colleagues. So again, there was need to rethink about the process of appointing these student leaders in schools. When they are given an opportunity to campaign and then the others elect them, they owe their allegiance to the students. They now don't listen to school administration. This became a challenge. We were now told, can you rethink on the way you appoint or elect the school leaders. So whatever measure we put in place, I would want to say that there must be serious thinking prior to insisting a certain policy to be implemented. Some of them require funding, which you are aware with the funding in schools today. We cannot charge any extra levy until you get the approvals.
All right.
So there are certain recommendations that may not be able to be met.
All right.
We've looked at even the security of our schools.
Indimuli? Yes. Sorry, I have to cut you short because of time, but I also want to just talk about one of the other issues. Indimuli, I'll come to you, Jonathan. What the directive that has been given, by the government is that all these students who have been arrested their cases will not be handled as students, but as criminals. What is your take on that? Is that too much of punishment, also considering that their good conduct will also indicate that this person is a criminal?
Yeah, I think we are moving towards raising a generation of criminals. Sorry. These children are literally doing what the adults are doing. Betty, in this country, anytime people want to express themselves, be it workers in a company or politicians, they demonstrate, they picket, they strike. So why would it be that our leaders strike? We elect them to get into parliament, to get into Senate, they get into Council of Governors. But then when our students strike, we tell them that they cannot get a certificate of good conduct. They cannot be recommended for scholarship. They cannot be admitted into a university. I think it is ridiculous. We need to rethink. And as my teacher Indimuli says, deliberate thought needs to go into this. It is this reactionary face that the sector has received since independence needs to be phased out. The education sector, I think, is the most researched on sector in Kenya. It has had the highest number of task forces. It has had the highest number of directives. It has had the highest number of intentions to change, but it has never changed.
Right.
The problem lies in us not following through that which we recommend today. And if you look at the number of directives Dr. Matiang'i issued when he was Cabinet Secretary for Education, which have not been implemented, Ambassador Amina Mohammed is heading the same way, because every day she's calling for press conference and issuing new directives. Now, new directives without resources, without the manpower or the ability to implement, where are they going to take us?
Right.
So we need to step back, as I said earlier, and then start acting on that which we have promised to deliver.
All right,
yes.
Interesting. Finally, Indimuli, I'd like to hear your thoughts on the same. Do you think that this punishment is a bit too much on the students, the fact that their cases will be treated as criminal, they will not be able to get a good conduct certificate, and so on?
Thank you. One man who has always said that we must take very serious disciplinary action on students who are found guilty. I would say some of the measures being put in place, when they are well thought of course, we need to hold the students, if found guilty, accountable. But as we do this, we must also remember we must provide for them an opportunity to continue and grow and change into good citizens. That's why, as Kesha, we've been saying what happened to the Boston institutions, to the approved schools. Because I remember when we were growing up, my parent would always tell me, you unakuwa kichwa ngumu, I'll take you to a approved school uende unyonye ng'ombe huko, so that you grow knowing that if I continue messing, there is somewhere I'll go and suffer. So if I want to continue enjoying, then I need to be of good conduct. So those found guilty, to me, they must be punished for their deeds. But as our colleague, our guest is saying, they have learned. They have seen our seniors, they have seen our leaders do the same things, burn places, and they walk scot-free. They get their good conduct certificates and they become our leader. So to them, to a child today, looks at that as any other threat. I will still burn and get my good conduct. There must be a way. To me, I propose the system the Ministry of Education is introducing now can be very effective. The UPI number system, where a student is assigned a unique number. If a student messes in school A and is punished for it, I will propose that let even this student be put out of learning for at least a year to reflect upon his own character, so that if they try to move from school A to school B, and that UPI number is input in the system shows that you cannot admit this one because he's on suspension for a period of 1 year or a period of six months. So that a student knows that if I find myself in a problem, then I can be delayed in completion of my studies. Because we also wouldn't like to throw them out and let them grow into thugs. We want to give them an opportunity to reflect on their wrongdoing so that they can slowly change. And I want to appeal to the general society that whenever we are aggrieved, burning, throwing stones and breaking is not the way to show. Because we are showing our young people, they grow up with that in their mind and they see it as the norm. So even when we tell them stoning and burning a dormitory is wrong, they have seen, even today you've aired something on Marikiti Market. And when you aired it, what was being shown? There was fire on the roads. Where did that fire come from? So a student, a child at the age of 12, watching it, 17, watching it, believes that when I'm aggrieved, there must be some form of fire. So as a society, we must change in the way in which we express our displeasure and find an amicable way of discussing it with the seniors.
All right.
And that is the challenge we are facing today in schools.
All right, Indimuli, thank you so much for speaking to us. Indimuli Kahi, he is the chair of the Kenya Secondary School Heads Association, just talking to us really about the unrest in schools. We've also had Jonathan Wesaya. Thank you for your time. He's also an education expert talking to us on the same. Let us know what you think, really, what's your take is on the unrest in schools. Quite a number of students have been arrested so far. A number of schools have been closed. And we'd like to hear your thoughts really as a Kenyan. What do you think really is the problem and how can it be handled? KTN News Centre is our hashtag, or you can choose to tweet